Hello everyone, welcome to another themes video. Today it's going to be on how outbreaks are investigated. So it's a video on surveillance and outbreak investigation. So how are outbreaks investigated? They are investigated in 9 steps. So it's first to verify the diagnosis. 2 is to establish that a outbreak is occurring, so the existence of an outbreak. 3 is to count the cases. 4 is to describe the epidemiology. 5 is to formulate and test the hypothesis. 6 is to assess local response capacity and address resource gaps. 7 is to set up control measures. 8 is effective communication of findings. And 9 is to increase surveillance or intensify surveillance. So what is an outbreak? An outbreak is an increase in the observed number of cases of a disease or health problem compared to the expected number. It can be for a given place or a specific group of people over a particular time period. So it's just an increase of the observed number of cases when you compare it to the expected number of cases. So surveillance is the bread and butter of public health. Without surveillance, one would never know if an outbreak is actually occurring. So what is surveillance? So surveillance is the ongoing systematic collection, analysis, and interpretation of data on a timely fashion in order for action to take place. Okay. So why should we do surveillance? In order to assess the size of the problem and for resource planning. So you can see how big is the outbreak or how big is the problem and where the resources should be addressed in order to overcome this problem. And also the surveillance will provide data for supportive or evidence-based decision-making regarding interventions and hypotheses and formulation of hypotheses and testing and things like that. Okay, so most infectious diseases is laboratory-based defined, meaning that the test, in order to have a clear diagnosis, it should be a laboratory test, due to the fact that a lot of these diseases are very similar to one another. So this is also very important that we're going to do now is the category 1 conditions, which is immediate notification on suspicion. Okay, so immediate notification on suspicion. So it's things like acute rheumatic fever, anthrax, botulism, cholera, diphtheria, enteric fever, foodborne disease outbreak, listeriosis, malaria, measles, meningitis, the plague, polio, rabies, all these things, smallpox, yellow fever, all these things should be notified immediately on only suspicion, not even laboratory based. Then you get your category 2s. These are just immediate notifications after a diagnosis. And then you get your category 3, which you have to notify within 7 days. Okay, so let's look at the first step, which is verification of diagnosis. Once again, a laboratory diagnostic test needs to be done because some diseases mimic one another. And also new diseases, they need to be cultured and sequenced. Okay, so they need to be cultured and sequenced, just as coronavirus had to be sequenced to know it's a new disease. So the second step is establish that an outbreak exists. So it just requires surveillance data. So you just compare it to the expected amount. If it's more, then an outbreak has occurred. And then you identify and count cases, and you will create a line list. Okay, then you will describe the epidemiology. So you'll use that line list, and you'll describe the affected persons by time, the place, risk factors, and any other meaningful data. You'll create an epidemiological curve. You have hypothesis generation and things like that. So here's an example of how you would, your fourth step, to describe the epidemiology. This is the listeriosis outbreak in South Africa in 2017. As one can see, the epidemiology is described in this graph. Then you'll formulate and test hypotheses. And you can do it in two ways. It is a cohort study or a case control. A cohort study you'll mostly use in foodborne outbreaks or foodborne illnesses, used when the size of the population at risk is known. Therefore, one is able to determine the incident risks rates. Where in case control, this is more in like airborne diseases or any other infectious diseases. Is the challenge lies in identification of controls where exposure is unknown. So you don't know how many people are exposed through this specific pathogen. Then you assess local response capacity and address resources gaps. You may require human resources or material resources, and resources may be found from other programs, etc. They can be government funded, etc. And then you will set up control measures, such as you'll tell people to wash their hands for 20 seconds. You'll try to moderate the exposure to the agent. You'll set up control measures in order to stop the spread of the specific pathogen. Then you'll communicate your findings to the general public. So communication is very key at all points of the outbreak. Good messages should be provided to the country in terms of reliable resources and guidelines. Also information to decrease anxiety, such as you should tell what is known about the disease, what authorities are doing to prevent or help improve the conditions, what the public can do to protect themselves, etc. And then also you'll intensify the surveillance on this specific pathogen. The World Health Organization advises the use of an incident management system, and also you upgrade your surveillance so that the next outbreak is seen faster and it can be stopped faster. So thank you for listening to this video on how outbreaks are investigated. Like and subscribe. Cheers.